Welcome to the Channel Chat podcast. Hello, I'm Marc Sumner, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have Pete Tomlinson, the CEO of Windsor Telecom, in the virtual studio. How are we doing, Pete?
Hey, Mark, I'm good. Thanks for having me on.
Good, no, my pleasure. Thanks very much for coming on. So, Pete, for some of the listeners that maybe don't know Windsor Telecom, could you just give us sort of a bit of a flavour about what you do over there?
Yeah, sure. So I guess Windsor grew up through inbound telephony, memorable numbers, moved into inbound call management, contact centre services, intelligent call management. And I guess for 20 years was probably the poster child for that product set. Then probably just as I was joining the company about 15, 16 months ago, kind of woke up and realised we've got all these customers that love what we do, but we do one thing for them brilliantly. And actually, as the kind of world of software, comms, IT all converge, actually there's a huge opportunity to diversify and start doing a lot more things for them.
Yeah, because you come from a background of obviously an MD at TalkTalk, obviously a large company. What made you join Windsor Telecom at that stage of your career?
I mean, TalkTalk's a large company, but it's a PLC, but you've got to remember it's also kind of still a founder-led business with Charles Dunstan still being very active there. So I think culturally, I probably wouldn't have coped in a normal PLC. But I've always done kind of change and transformation roles. My first kind of gig in this industry was back in the late 90s through like the first time people were digging up the roads and building fibre networks. So that's kind of come full circle. And I've done a mix of big things and small things, but it's always change, it's always transformation, it's always growth, it's always when there's something exciting and different going on.
Yeah, and so what was it about Windsor Telecom that really got you excited about joining them?
So I think there was two things that I loved about the business. One is it was quite a raw, untapped potential. So we had 5,000 customers that loved what we did for them, but we only did that one thing. So it was a great platform to build out on. The other thing is a lot of what I've been thinking about in the market and the direction the market was going. I'm a big fan of sort of mid-market, mid-sized businesses. And I felt that the asset owners needed hyperscale. So if you're going to dig up the roads and be a network operator, you need scale. If you're going to run a data center, you need to be Azure, AWS, Google. Or you need IPR and you need software and you need to own the code base. So you needed kind of hyperscale on the asset ownership side. But a lot of the traditional resellers, you've got margin squeeze, you've got limited differentiation, you're just reselling something. Yeah. What Windsor had done with the intelligent call management platform was to APIs, to take those kind of automatic links and API into the underlying vendors to create their own kind of customer experience at the top. And I thought, well, actually, if that can work brilliantly in kind of contact center, intelligent call management, that can work in connectivity, that can work with Azure and IT services. That's a model that can actually kind of create a new way, which isn't asset owner, subscale asset owner, isn't margin squeeze reseller, but delivers a bit more value to our customers in either of those kind of 2 points.
Yeah. So when you joined, obviously no one could have predicted COVID. Oh, hopefully not. How did you cope with the first sort of few months of COVID at Telecom, Windsor Telecom?
So it's going to sound kind of bizarre, but we ignored it.
It's bizarre.
So we've looked at COVID as being a tactical thing rather than a strategic thing. So it's something we've got to manage. It's something we've got to respond to. But fundamentally, the way we've looked at it is everything that made sense in this industry, a year ago, 18 months ago, in terms of those kind of, whether it be technical trends or social trends or anything else, still makes sense in a post-COVID world. If anything, it's just accelerated adoption and it makes 10 times more sense now. So the way we've treated COVID is, as a serious thing, is something that's got to be respected, got to be managed, but actually very much is a tactical thing to overcome and thing to work with, rather than something that should make you throw the strategy out the window and go, oh my God, what are we doing?
Yeah, because a lot of people had that, throw the strategy out the window and what we're doing now. You did the bizarre thing of actually securing funding in 2020 and actually did an acquisition. So tell us about that, because most people will be thinking it's keep the lights on time. Even though IT companies did have a good pandemic, there was a lot of people panicking in the market, but you were actually on the acquisition trail. So fill me in about that.
Yeah, so I mean, the first thing was, we're lucky that we're a cash generative business. So you've got to look at it sensibly and go, actually, can we even in a reasonable worst case scenario, and what everyone's business continuity plans, reasonable worst case scenario got redefined pretty quickly for everyone.
They did.
But can we make sure we can trade through this? But we're lucky in that we're a cash generative business and we were a debt-free business at that time. But one of the things that we identified is actually we needed two things, that were part of the original plan that made perfect sense to carry on with. One is strengthening the skills and capability of the team. So that IT services acquisition, yes, it brought more customers, yes, it brought more product, but what it really did is bring highly skilled IT, engineering and operational people into the business. And that's something that customers needed more than ever. Yeah. And particularly as, how customers were responding to, their own COVID situations and their own work from home situations, and really understanding that kind of, I guess Windsor had come from a comms heritage, but actually software comms, IT, with unified comms, with devices, with home working, with business continuity, we're all kind of coming together. So the acquisition made perfect sense in that it really strengthened the skill base of the team and actually put us in a far better position to do the only thing which really matters. If you serve your customers brilliantly and give them something they need and want, then business tends to take care of itself.
A personal question here, Pete, with the actual name of the company, Windsor Telecom, does that put some companies off thinking, oh, well, actually, they only do telecoms, I'm not even interested in sort of speaking to them about anything to do with IT or infrastructure or anything like that? So does that put people off the actual name?
It's a bit of a crap name, isn't it?
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Like 20 years ago, let's be candid, 20 years ago, like a lot of businesses, it grew up as a, founder-owned telecoms business during the liberalisation of, buying 0845 numbers from Energis and everything else. So it made perfect sense when the business is founded. I think as we, make more acquisitions, as we continue to diversify, as we continue to grow, I think candidly, we've got a really good sense of brand and what I call like proper brand, like what's our culture, what's our values, what do we do for people? Yeah. But I think the name at some point will have to catch up with the brand.
Yeah, and that wasn't
chat first.
Absolutely. So what would you say is the number one thing that you've maybe started doing over the last 12 months? And, you as the CEO, the leadership's coming from the top. What's the one thing you started doing in the last 12 months that you're going to continue doing in 2021?
Do you know what? I think the things you do are the same, it's just how you do it. So I think you talk to other like chief execs or anybody or any of the management team here, and they're saying, kind of like the things you do should be congruent to your personality as a leader, to your business, to your team. So I don't think that what you do is differently. You engage with customers, you engage with colleagues, you focus on making sure everyone's kind of happy and comfortable and knows what they're doing and being really clear on the vision for the business. So I think the what doesn't change, like the how changes. Obviously, there's a lot more online stuff. There's a lot more, I think sometimes things have to be planned more, which has probably been valuable, and a lot of stuff happens organically. So, you have a chat with someone on the way to, I was going to say the fridge to get coffee, but, fridge to get another Diet Coke, or on the way to get a coffee or whatever. So I think we've had to be a lot more structured. And I think some of that shape and structure, the way we've shared and articulated our 90-day plans has been a little bit more structured. But I think it's the how, not the what, that changes.
Pete, with you, obviously, I think you've got around circa sort of 57, 60 people around that. Is it around that?
Yeah, 60 people currently.
Yeah. How did they adapt to sort of like the home working situation when the lockdown happened last year? So
I think, they went through the initial wave of, this is fine, this is all good. We're home working, walk downstairs. I think now definitely there is a balance of, people who are missing the culture, missing the connectivity with their colleagues and everything. So, but you know what? I think tactically everyone can work. Yeah, practically everyone can work. They can collaborate. They can communicate. They can do the tasks. I think it's the creativity. We're going through a lot of change. It's the launching new products. It's the onboarding people. It's the integrating acquisition. It's the creativity that suffers. Coming 8th of March, when the kids are back at school, everyone will breathe the biggest sigh of relief.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Have you had any sort of challenges around sort of mental health? Because I was speaking to a couple of leaders yesterday about on their business, and one of them had 50%. They had a team of 10. They had 50% of their team, 5 of them signed off with mental health. How have you sort of managed to deal with mental health in your company?
So I think the first thing is what underlines dealing with mental health is having a decent culture and recruiting a decent leadership team which genuinely care about people. I think you can put whatever slogan you want on the wall, but if your managers aren't genuinely decent human beings who care about people, then you're kind of screwed before you begin. So I think the foundations have to be right and the company culture has to be right. The other thing about mental health is, I'm not an expert in this, but we've all become more attuned to it than ever before. Generally, like the catalyst and the cause are very different. So you've got to understand that, work is only a part of that. You don't know what's going on in other people's lives and other people's worlds, and we can only be part of a solution or part of the problem. But I would come back to, I think people do talk about it more openly. I think that's a good thing. But generally speaking, trust, respect, cutting people a little bit of slack, if you've got a decent culture, I think that takes care a lot of the environmental things to, at the very least, make sure you're not making it worse for anyone. And hopefully you're making it better. Yeah,
absolutely. And on that fact, there was a lot of reports of record months in the market, and some people are having quiet months, but it sounds distasteful to say, but it's been quite a good pandemic really for the IT industry and the telecoms industry. But is there anything that you tried doing in 2020 that you've stopped doing now within the business that you sort of try and think it didn't really work for you?
So I think if we flip it on its head, there's something we'd started doing that we accelerated. And that is one of the decisions we made at the beginning of the pandemic was to drop all our minimum contract terms because we didn't want to be seen to be profiting from the pandemic. So I think it's okay to sell you something, and if it helps your business run, and we've got to do that profitably. But what we didn't want, a year ago when we went into lockdown, was people making buying decisions with a gun against their head. So one of the things we said, as far as possible, and as far as, it was things like software, comms, cloud-based services, and we could back it off to our vendor ecosystem, we would drop all our minimum contract terms, which is something that we've been looking at doing and creating more flexibility, but we massively accelerated so that we could say to customers, look, take the service, as long as it works for your business, great. And actually doing that, with the hunch that as people adopted things, probably they would love it and continue to use it. And we found about 85% of the services that we sold with no contract term in that first couple of months are still live. That's been really positive for us.
You must have got a lot of goodwill from customers with doing that, almost like not tying them into things where they think, well, actually, I can't get out of this, because a lot of people get put off by that, don't they?
Yeah, it takes the pressure off the buying decision for the customer, particularly when they're having to make a decision which might normally be a 3-month process, and they're having to make it in 3 hours, and it just creates that kind of environment for them to trust the sales guys. And to be honest, it's one of my bugbears, particularly on some of the heritage comms side of the industry. We come across vendors who are selling you a crappy phone, which is actually an Android tablet, in bundling a software license, sticking it on a 7-year lease. And you think, blimey, if I had my mobile phone from 7 years ago, how would I feel about that now? And, I think we're big champions of, the refresh cycle on tech is so quick now, and you've got to sort of back yourself to stay current. So it's something that we've been debating doing anyway. So we thought, good time to go all in on it.
Yeah. And what's been the feedback from customers on that?
Yeah, well, I think they really appreciated it just because it takes the pressure off them. They've got so much going on. And it's a big change. You change a comm system, or you change an IT system, or you adopt a new bit of software. Nobody wants to get that wrong anyway. No one wants to go through training new users, onboarding it, and swapping it out. But just to take the pressure off and go, look, we're in this together. We think this is the right thing for you. If it turns out not to be, we'll sort that out together as well.
Yeah, because one of my researchers said to me that you've got a 4.95% Trustpilot rating, Now, how have you done that? Because most people aren't getting that. Most people aren't getting that at all, Pete. So how have you done that? Do you got some good customers or lots of people putting on good ratings for you?
Look, I think we've got two things. One is our account management model is very much that our sales guys look after customers kind of cradle to grave. So, they've got accountability. Yes, we've got an operational provisioning, provide, assure team, etc. But our account managers are absolutely focused on that kind of customer experience beginning to end, and they're held accountable for the customer experience and rewarded on customer satisfaction is a KPI. I think recruiting is important. We recruit people who genuinely care about customers. And actually, truth be told, new logo customers are hard to win. We all know that. Actually, our strategy is very much predicated on doing more for that 5,000 customers that already love us. And when we make acquisitions, they're often single product or only doing 2 products and cross-selling to those customers. So if they don't love what you do, then that strategy, screwed before you begin.
Yeah. Did your communication style change during the last sort of 12 months? Because there was obviously customers, a lot of end user customers it was keep lights on time they just didn't have any, or they didn't have enough cash in the bank to maybe keep going. Did your communication style change? Because I heard that people were trying to sort of still cold call and especially in the first 6 months of the pandemic, they were still cold calling and trying to sort of sell additional products and services when customers were like actually just really worried about actually staying afloat. So where did you sort of sit on that, and did your communication style change?
So it was a dilemma in those first few weeks, because you sat there going, we've got something we think can genuinely help.
Yeah.
Yeah. The last thing we want to be is trying to sell to you when you've got all this stuff going on in your world. I think removing contract terms helped with that, because it was a more authentic, look, we're trying to help kind of message. Yeah. So I think a lot of it was through the account managers, and all the comms we did was about being supportive. A lot of it hints and tips videos, a lot of suggestions, lot of sharing what other customers had done, and actually also kind of we had a strategy or a kind of framework. Sounds like really grand, that overstates it, but we had a kind of framework that says, look, everybody's going to react and respond, which we call cobbled together comms, where people are using a bit of Zoom, they're using a bit of WhatsApp, they're using a bit of VPN, people going home with their tower units on the train. As you went for that, we had a second phase, which was kind of what we call plan and improve, which is what's the tactical stuff you can do to make it more secure, make it better, integrate it better. And we're starting to come into what we've called a kind of embrace and optimize phase now, which is kind of how do you make this work for the long term, and kind of giving people fairly practical, tangible stuff through those phases, and what other people were doing we found was quite helpful as well. Yeah,
brilliant. And as the CEO, Pete, what have you learned about yourself, and sort of secondly, what have you learned about the business over the last 12 months that you'll continue in, hopefully in 2021?
Good. Yeah, so I joined, obviously I'd only been here 3 or 4 months when this kind of happened. So you're doing a sort of transformation piece, you're new in, you've got all of these plans, and someone kind of lobs a pandemic and running off the home into the middle of it. I think holding your nerve, staying true to who you are, being authentic is great. But it definitely took longer without that face-to-face for people to get to know me. We've also brought a lot of talent into the business, particularly in our sort of management layer as we scale up. And I think they would all say the same things. When you're got FaceTime, people build that kind of trust and confidence and get to know you. And that definitely, I think more for them than for me is sort of you sit there and you think, God, I'm just you are down to earth guy, but you just joined as the chief exec, and they haven't got the opportunity to learn that. And I think you have to be really empathetic to sort of both sides of that. I think the other thing which I've struggled most with is you have to learn that their kids could be in the background of a team meeting. You're like a trooper. I don't want to be the one teaching your kids new language. So with my communication styles, I've had to try and swear less.
Yeah. Have you found it difficult to sort of impart your leadership messaging over Zoom? Because I've heard a lot of people. You mentioned it earlier about people going on Zoom or 8x8 or Cisco, whatever it is, and the adoption of that is being sort of quite, and people have really struggled even to sort of log onto these systems. And have you sort of struggled in terms of like adopting your leadership and getting your right messaging out to your team? If you haven't.
So you say to you, I'm a bit of a, probably a Microsoft Teams fanboy, but not because of Microsoft Teams, but because of the way it sits in Office 365 and stuff. So Zoom and stuff is great. And we've seen a lot of customers move from things like Zoom onto 365 because Zoom is like fairly standalone. It was great in that cobbled together comms phase. But what we found is like lots of small informal stuff, which is quite congruent with our style anyway, is more impactful than lots of big set piece stuff. So we did an online Christmas party and all that stuff, which is great. But actually it's every manager having a Teams channel where they're regularly chatting to their teams, me regularly posting, videos out, whether it's walking the dogs or whether it's, like morning reflections or whether you've had a really good sales month or whether we had a slightly worse sales month. And I think what we found is frequency was probably more important than like quality or scripting or really thinking about the message. And I think that's probably one thing we've done is we've worried less about quality and we've probably focused more on frequency.
Yeah. Did you have it very rigid in terms of like Monday sales meeting or Friday rounds up or anything like that? Or was it just sort of frequency of messaging, constant communication?
So before kind of lockdown, we had some of that, like, we did like, so you do weekly management meetings, we have what we, sort of 90-day plan meetings where they're shared once a month between functions. We actually did a weekly quiz in the office where it was face-to-face. So we were kind of ahead of the game with we will do a quiz kind of back. What we've probably done is kept all the set piece stuff and then just complemented it with this almost like a kind of Twitter-esque theme of thoughts, like you might get a kind of, not quite a Donald Trump stream of consciousness. Plug it with that, what's going on in your mind that you might share with people if you met them informally, but you realise weeks gone by and you've not had the opportunity to have that informal interaction. And that's what all the leadership team have been doing, is trying to complement those set piece ones with that kind of stream of consciousness.
Yeah, have you had to adjust your leadership style at all? Because I noticed a lot of people, maybe they were great in huddles in person or they were great for face-to-face meetings, but doing it over Zoom or over video, they've just really struggled. So have you had to sort of, and even and further to that, Pete, have you had to sort of look at your recruitment strategy and think, actually, that person might be good face-to-face, but I'm not getting a good vibe over video?
Yeah, I mean, I think a few people, you had to be quite forgiving of people who were new to video. And understand that, like in the first instance, it's a new medium, so they might not be as comfortable, or they might not be coming across as brilliantly as they would face to face. But I think, truth be told, I think the underlying character traits, the underlying experience, the underlying competence, I think comes across either way. You just maybe need to be a little bit more forgiving.
Yeah. Do you also think as well, when you're trying to onboard these people, how do you get them boarded into the culture? Because you mentioned culture before and about the things that you'll continue to do. But if you've never met them personally and they haven't met any members of the team personally, how are you actually integrating them into the business, into the sort of the core values of Windsor Telecom?
I think it's a collective responsibility. I think if you've got an approach which is going like, the people team will onboard them, or I'll onboard them, or their manager will onboard them, I think actually probably the truth is their colleagues do a better job of onboarding them than any of us do. And that's the one thing I would say is when we've had new people start, colleagues have rallied around them brilliantly and sort of been there on chat, formal and informal sort of buddying systems, colleagues across, the ops guys helping the sales guys out and vice versa. So I think it's probably a collective effort, and you could do all the set piece stuff, but when you join an organization, you get the culture from your colleagues as much as you do from the leadership team.
Yeah, absolutely. And with your team now, Pete, what is your view on your work from home policy? Because I'm hearing over the last 12 months, I've heard this a lot. Oh, we love working at home. Then they've done it for 6 months. Oh, we hate working from home now. And now I'm hearing the last sort of 3 months is most people want to get back to some sort of office or some sort of normality. Now, what's your view on it for your team at home? Have you got work from home policies sort of in place now?
Yeah, so we said, I guess back last summer, sort of when everybody was getting a little bit optimistic that things were coming with, 3 seconds.
Optimistic.
Last summer we went out and signposted and said, look, a lot of people want to know when this is all over, whenever that is, what's it going to be like? So we went out back then and said we got a set of principles around working, and we said we're not going to move. We don't really like policies. That's kind of like feels a little bit kind of like treating them like you're at school or whatever. But we got a set of principles that say these are the things which we think matters. So you've got to be available for your colleagues when they need you available. There's certain times when being in the office makes sense. There's certain roles that make sense. So if you've got a new starter, you might have a role that can normally be done 3 days a week at home, but if you've got a new starter, actually you need to be there that week to help them out, because it's very hard to train and onboard a new starter remotely. Some roles, our software development guys work brilliantly, remotely. A lot of our sales guys, break into a cold sweat from a lack of social interaction if they've been stuck at home for more than 10 minutes. So we've made it far more around, here's a set of principles around, what's right for you, what's right for your team, what's right for your colleagues, to make sure that we can all be effective, and recognise that isn't a static thing. That isn't everybody 3 days a week or this team 2 days a week. It's very contextual, and we kind of shared that. And I think people respected that and they bought into that.
Yeah. Do you think, obviously, you've got the office back open again now, have you? Or what's your policy now?
So we've got about 10% of the people in the office at the moment. We've got some IT engineering guys that need to come in and pick stuff up. We've got, a couple of sort of roles and people which are in the office specific reasons. So we've got about 10% occupancy with kind of essential roles, which could work from home potentially, but probably fit the, description of need to be here to be effective. And actually, at the moment, we're just going through probably what a lot of people are doing in reconfiguring more towards breakout spaces and meeting spaces, and just sort of reconfiguring the office to make it a little bit more usable as people start to come back in over, hopefully, the next few months to the 21st of June, fingers crossed.
Yeah, because I was going to actually say that, Pete. If we look to the future now, what's your prediction of what your office space and your environment and your offering to your clients will be like in the future?
So a bit like everybody talks about technology, and you had the kind of on-prem zealots and the cloud zealots, and the reality turned out to be hybrid. I think hybrid's a bit overused in the kind of tech industry, isn't it? Everything's kind of like a hybrid something. But I think that'll be the reality. As we said, the principles will be, most people will be at home some of the time and in the office some of the time, but that might be an 80-20 split one way or an 80-20 split the other way, depending on the role and their circumstances.
Yeah, great. And my last question for you, Pete, and I know you're not Mystic Meg or anything, but what's your prediction for the demand of your services and Windsor Telecom services in the market in sort of 2021? Where do you see it going in the next sort of few months?
Yeah, as we said right back at the top of this conversation, I think everything that we were doing before makes sense now and will continue to make sense. I think we are seeing some of the projects which were, maybe I wish I'd done it before the pandemic, but I'm not sure I'm confident enough to do it during the pandemic. We are starting to see some of those conversations warming up again now, which is nice to see, and people starting to think about that more like, actually, I've taken advantage of this technology in a tactical way. How do I do it more strategically? How do I make it more secure? Some of that stuff I wish I'd adopted and wish I'd rolled out, because often it's the end user adoption, which is the challenge, not the technology change. And I think people were sometimes a little bit nervous about that end user adoption with people working from home. So I think that the trajectory of the industry, those meta trends, that hybrid working, the kind of cloud technologies, this is an accelerator to adoption rather than having changed anything that was fundamentally, it was already in play anyway.
Yeah, I think I concur with that, Pete. I think it is an acceleration of what we were doing before, and there was a lot of companies that needed it to happen. Almost it sounds terrible, but they need to actually. You know, us as a business, we really struggled with the first sort of 3 months. We didn't even have laptops or anything, so it was catching up with what everyone else is doing. So, Pete, look, thanks so much for your time. You've been a great guest, and we'll speak again soon.
It's been fun being on. Thanks for having me.